Hey folks, I'm excited to share my conversation with Britt Walford. And just a quick note, Britt will be returning for a special segment next week too. So if any of you have questions for him, email them to me at thetrapset@gmail.com. This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording by phone and releasing new episodes every day. Today's guest is Britt Walford, who's perhaps best known as the drummer for Slint. Slint was formed in Louisville in 1986, while Britt and his bandmates were still teenagers living at home. During its brief lifespan, Slint operated in relative obscurity, but the band's music has proven to be a massive influence on subsequent generations and previous generations alike. Even established legends such as Robert Plant have professed their affinity for the band. Britt's incredibly unique, angular style won him many fans among the musical cognoscenti. And aside from his work with Slint, he's played with artists such as The Breeders on their first album, Pod, the For Carnation, and Will Oldham, among others. Britt spoke to me from his home in Louisville.
I'm the only one left. The storm took them all. He managed as he tried to stand.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Britt, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. How you doing?
Not bad. What have you been up to today?
Well, I went to a park and just hung out. One I don't usually go to. Not many people down there, and just drove around, got some gas.
So what's the first thing you remember?
Well, let's see, in life.
Yeah.
Man, maybe, let's see. I think the first thing I remember is some shag carpet. I was getting a baby picture taken on and sort of that happening. But that one's sort of hard because I was a baby and because there's a photo of it.
So you can't tell if it's your mind reconstructing it or if it's a real memory?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I have that structure in my head of no, I remember that, but then maybe people have told me well, that's not really possible.
It's funny because shag carpeting reminds me of childhood too.
Yeah. Man,
I have some cool in my podcast office here. Maybe it's to bring people back to their childhood origins when they come in to talk to me, almost like a psychiatrist or something.
Man, that's cool. Yeah, is it pretty readily available in LA here?
I had to order it online, and I almost threw it away because it smelled so bad for the first 2 weeks that I had it in here.
Oh, wow.
It just smelled like chemical.
Oh, yeah.
Like oil.
Huh, that is weird.
So it's not made out of wool or anything. It's made out of some sort of probably carcinogenic fibers. I don't know. Asbestos or something. I don't know.
Man, glad that went away.
Yeah, but who knows what's still out there in products.
Yeah.
I just assume that anything I like has something carcinogenic about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like some stuff more than others, but it's good it went away, you know.
Yeah. So I saw this movie that was about Slint, and your parents were featured in it. It mentioned that your dad was a piano player, and was your mom a musical person as well?
She is, but she doesn't really play instruments, so she likes music and listens to, you know, like her own stuff, but doesn't play instruments.
Did you have siblings growing up?
No.
So when you were first kind of discovering your own musical taste, was there anybody that was turning you on to stuff distinct from what you were listening to at your parents' house?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really remember. I remember like my cousin who babysat me a lot listening to AM radio and stuff, but that was kind of already happening. And I don't remember how I got into like rock, because I did pretty early. And I don't really know how I got those records, or, you know, like...
What records are you talking about?
Well, I guess AC/DC is the main group, the main ones, like, and, you know, other than that, like Toto, Foreigner, Triumph, Boston was a big one. Yeah, I feel like I haven't tended to listen to lots of different kinds of music, but I listen to select stuff a lot. So those were all big ones.
Like you'll get obsessive about a particular song or artist for a while and listen to it over and over?
I think so. Yeah, and I just seem to not know as much as other people, you know, as far as musicians and lots of different stuff.
Do you still come back to those records that you listened to in the 70s?
Yeah, you know, like, and then it can just kind of be weird or just seem not, you know, that satisfying or good or something, you know. But yeah, you know, I feel like there's only so much you can do of that, you know.
There's definitely been times in the last decade where I've gone through a little Toto phase.
Cool.
Jeff Porcaro, their drummer, was one of my favorites. Wow.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not really that familiar, but
well, their dad, Joe Porcaro, is a drum teacher. So there's a keyboard player from Toto. I think it's Steve Porcaro, and then his brother Jeff was the drummer. He died like over 20 years ago. But they were both kind of like session aces in Los Angeles in the 70s and 80s. And Jeff played on like Off the Wall by Michael Jackson and records like that. And I think he played on some Steely Dan stuff too. But anyway,
Man.
And like Boz Skaggs. Anyway, there's a soft spot in my heart for that stuff.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I've you know, heard his name a lot, and that's one thing I really like is that kind of era of drumming. And like when you say Michael Jackson, it makes me think of Madonna. Mm-hmm. Like some of her records, like I really love that. Just like seamless melding of electronic and real stuff or something. Like it really impresses me, like the production on records like that.
Yeah. Actually, the person that produced or co-wrote some of her early stuff with her was a drummer. So maybe that's why that makes sense. I can't remember his name, but he lives next door to a friend of mine out here.
Wow.
I'll have to get him on the show. I'm blanking on his name right now. But anyway, Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. And then this other drummer, like the second drummer of Mahavishnu Orchestra, a guy named Michael Walden, who played on all these freaky fusion-y records, then went on to become the top kind of R&B producer, pop producer of the 80s and early 90s with Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and people like that. So
Wow.
I think it's interesting. I think drummers have a knack for production often.
Huh. Man, that kind of makes sense. Like, there's a lot of subtlety, and I mean, getting drum sounds is always such a big deal.
It seems like you guys got drum sounds for the Slint records pretty quickly, though. Wasn't Spiderland recorded over the course of a weekend or something like that?
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we were pretty versed in, like, sort of like a natural room sound in our minds. I mean, we actually wanted a particularly natural room sound, but we were pretty, like, familiar with the concept from Albini. Mm-hmm. And then I think that the studio just happened to, kind of fit that bill.
So the first album you did with Slint was with Steve Albini, and had you worked with him previous to that?
No.
But you were fans of Big Black or Rape Man, his other bands?
Yeah, huge fans of Big Black at the time. And Brian, the singer and guitar player from Slint, he had met Steve and played shows with Big Black when he was in Squirrel Bait. But I don't think any of the rest of us had met Steve.
What did you learn from working with Steve? And did he act like a producer, or, he doesn't call himself a producer, he calls himself an engineer, but do you feel like he was kind of creatively involved beyond getting sounds?
I mean, I think he's, like, opinionated as far as studio stuff goes, and so I think that he, sort of presents a strong presence and impetus in the studio to do things sort of certain ways to a certain extent, but beyond that, I think he's always sort of responding to, okay, what do you want to do here? But he also has very kind of like defined ways of doing things, So, I mean, I think most of us were up for, sort of like what his suggestions might be, and pretty open-minded, like, going into it. I don't think I didn't have a strong sense of what I wanted. I had some ideas, but that was about it.
Do you feel like Slint was a pure democracy, or were there leaders?
I think it was pretty dang democratic. The first bass player, Ethan Buckler, he ended up feeling like alienated by that recording session, particularly, and I think that was, kind of a sticking point for him for being in the band anymore, and so that, kind of sucks that he felt that way, and that was kind of overlooked, I think. But generally, in that lineup and then the later lineup, I think it was pretty democratic.
Tell me how you would write songs.
usually, I think maybe always somebody would just come with an idea, maybe one or two parts, or maybe even more, and then people would sort of come up with their part to go with that. And then from there we would kind of collaborate on the arrangements and that kind of thing.
Were any of the songs based off of a drum part?
No, they were not. But I think that's a cool idea. I think of things that I would like to do that with.
And were you playing guitar at the beginning of the band? Like you already knew how to play guitar in addition to drums?
Yeah. Yeah. Just as far as like making up parts and stuff, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, I want to go back a little bit. So we were talking about your parents who are both music lovers, and in your dad's case, an amateur musician himself.
Yeah.
When did you start playing drums?
It was with the first band that I was in, called Languid and Flaccid, and everybody just sort of like switched instruments, and so that's how I got started playing there. And
you mean
then,
you would like rotate instruments?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and then for a while we were practicing, or maybe a later group was practicing at my parents' house, and that the guy who had the drums just left them there for maybe a year, and so that's how I got started.
Do you feel like you had a special connection to playing drums that didn't exist on other instruments?
I don't know really. I think I do now, or I kind of developed one, but I'm not sure I did initially.
Some artists find their voice by studying other artists or even mimicking and playing along with records. You mentioned you don't have a particularly encyclopedic knowledge of music. So when that drum set was left at your house, I'm wondering how you got in touch with your voice on the instrument.
Oh, man, that's a good question. Mostly play things on my own. I didn't do a lot of playing along with music, but I would try to do things that I heard people doing. Yeah, that was pretty much it. It was mostly centered around like, making things up. So, yeah, I think that's how it went. I didn't take lessons. I took a couple lessons like years later, and it was just sort of like, it's cool to learn something new, and then that can almost sort of like occupy you and inspire you in different directions for a while, even just one little thing,
Right. And sometimes if you try to take in a lot of information, it becomes hard to metabolize, hard to make it your own.
I can imagine that sounds like it.
Well, like I've gone through phases where I wasn't taking lessons, or I would take a single lesson over the course of a year or two and just work on that information. Mm-hmm. And try to integrate it into, like, find a way to relate to it in a personal way. Then I've gone through phases where I was in music school and, studying with all these different people, and it was kind of confusing. it was difficult to kind of integrate all of that. It
Wow.
took years and it was mostly like the process of elimination, like letting go of things that I couldn't necessarily use.
Wow. Man, that sounds really cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I learned, like, one of the things I learned in one of those lessons was like a Latin beat, and I don't feel like I've ever really incorporated Latin feels in my playing or music, but technically I think that's when I started doing, like, ghosting stuff, you know? Mm-hmm. So it was valuable.
What does it feel like when you get into the flow, when you're playing music and everything kind of aligns?
It feels, I guess, like comfortable and familiar and like validating and empowering, I think.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you're thinking at that moment, or are you kind of more just feeling?
I definitely think I'm thinking as well. Like because I feel like I've had experiences where I've been playing, like maybe one or two in particular, where I felt like I wasn't thinking, and that's almost like a scary thing, you know? Like I don't know why, but you know, like you're driving a car and you're like, wait a minute, how did I get here?
Right.
Like, you know. But yeah, so I think there's a lot of just, I don't know, listening and paying attention.
What was your confidence level like, around the time that Slint was active? Your confidence as a musician?
I felt pretty confident, I think. Yeah. It didn't seem to be like an issue. Yeah.
How, if at all, has your confidence level changed over the years?
I think it's definitely. I've become less confident, but yeah, that's like sometimes I feel sort of like conflicted about, you know, what's like a healthy thing, a healthy contribution that music I come up with could be making, or not. But then it's interesting because when you ask about how it feels to actually play, when I'm actually playing, then it feels like everything kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I want to talk more about this idea of a healthy contribution. I mean, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, sometimes like it seems like music can be more of like a visceral, like sort of fighting kind of music or something, you know, like heavy metal comes to mind or something, you know, and it, you know, it's something that I have wondered, like, well, is this, you know, a good thing, or is it, you know, just a sort of, I don't know, possibly not a good thing.
You mean heavy metal or your own contribution?
Well, either one, you know.
I mean, I feel like it's pretty natural to become less confident the more experience you get in life. It's almost like a paradox in a way. Because early on, you're coming into your voice for the first time, you're not aware of everything else that's happened before you. And, the more aware I've become of what other people are capable of, the less confident I became. But then I think in the end, you only have your voice, and that's the only thing you're uniquely qualified to contribute. So if you can find that, which I believe you have, that's pretty significant.
Man, that's awesome. Thanks. Yeah, that's true. Man, that's a really good way to look at it, and sort of cuts through like really being able to like think your way through it, or like fully. I mean, not that that's not a good thing to try to do, but it sort of is what it is, I guess, at the same time.
Right. I mean, I think thought can be a tool, but it can also be weaponized against ourselves,
Totally.
It's truly a double-edged sword. But
totally.
But I think, especially for somebody like yourself that kind of happens onto something unique early on, it can be hard to sustain that, because it's almost like you don't even know how you got to that point. And then once you become aware of everything else that's going around you in the wider world, you're like, oh, well, should I be able to do X, Y, or Z?
Definitely. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I mean,
but it's kind of like as a person, I mean, music is an extension of who you are as a person, and every person obviously has the right to, be alive and has something unique to contribute to the world.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But music is just kind of like a more ostentatious way of putting your personality out in front of other people for judgment,
Man, that's a good point too. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that somehow it seems more that way than some other things like drawing or painting. That's, even though it's not really, one of the things that's hardest for me to sort of feel confident about is any sort of like swagger, like in music. Like if I come up with something that just sounds that way, then I can be like, well, what is the point of this? Is this how is this like a good thing or something?
Yeah. So what's the origin of that questioning voice asking what the point of it is? Has that always been there?
No. So, and I think that's the origin of it would maybe be not thinking about it, and then having things sort of blindside you, and then you're like, wait a minute, like,
it's almost like you're trying to be the critical, like anticipate the critical voice of others to protect yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like, you're trying to be impervious to the attacks of like imagined critics.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yep. It's probably...
I think all of us go there at some point. Anybody that's been hurt in the process of making something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
On days I try
So what do you care about most right now?
Well, I guess it's my kid. Yep, that's it. That's it.
And you said she's 17?
Yeah.
Is she planning on going to college next year?
Yes.
I was thinking about one of your touch and go label mates, a guy by the name of Mac McNeely, who played in the Jesus Lizard. And he kind of retired from music when he had kids and then reemerged when his kids grew up. Do you foresee yourself becoming more active in music when your daughter goes away to school?
Man, I think that'd be great. If that happens, I would like that a lot. Yeah, I feel like unprepared really, or just like in the dark about what happens when kids get to be her age. Like, I didn't think about it much, and it seems like when they're young, people say, well, you should read this book, and it goes by fast, or different sort of points to help you sort of prepare. But with this stage, I feel like it's unknown. So yeah, if it works that way, that seems like it would be great.
Well, if you were to write a book, what kind of advice would you give?
Well, let's see. I have a girl, so one thing that comes to mind is just give her everything she wants. Like, just anything and everything she wants, just do all of that.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's not the best advice. I don't know. That's just something that I've thought.
Wait, but if it was a boy, you wouldn't want to give him everything that he wants?
I mean, I would kind of actually think that would be the same. I don't know. That's just how I've thought of it. And beyond that, I don't know. Maybe it's too early, like, to give out advice. I'm still just kind of like in the middle of it.
Are you are you still in a relationship with your daughter's mother?
No, we haven't been since before she was born.
Is your daughter artistically inclined?
She is. She doesn't play music. She did a little bit growing up, but she's mostly been into dance and like visual arts.
Have you played her Slint albums?
She's played them.
Did she give you her opinion on it?
I mean, she seems to think it's good, and other things she's very opinionated. Other things she's said she didn't think was that good. So,
what is your creative life like right now? Do you still write songs? Do you make time to play drums every day?
That sort of just comes when it comes. Although at times I do try to do it, like try to play drums or something. And so, yeah, it's just sort of like piling up ideas on tape,
Do you use a 4-track?
Man, I don't. And I have a problem with that. Like, I have never multi-tracked, and just sort of getting through the technical side of that seems like a hurdle for me.
Okay, so what do you use to record your ideas?
Usually just like a cassette recorder.
Oh, cool.
Or now like a phone.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a certain practice when you're doing that? Like, for example, I always try to force myself to at least write 2 parts that go together so that I don't have like tons of unfinished single parts.
Gosh. Man, that's a really smart idea.
I'm not always successful at it, but I try to do it.
Man, I mean, yeah, that's like the big thing, right? I mean, having the second part seems huge, and I think in the past I've sort of relied on other people becoming involved, and then that creating a second part or leading to it. And so, yeah, that seems like such a smart idea. Like, and I almost feel like I'm like, and maybe it's from coming from a sort of contrarian, like punk rock background, but I almost feel like I'm too hard on, that process of coming up with a second part. Like it can just sort of be like a little resting part or, a reprieve from what's going on.
Right.
But then that just seems like, oh, well, you can't just do that. That's like...
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, what was useful is I have been writing music for film and TV shows for about 17 years. And often the deadline is so aggressive that I have to turn off that negative voice and just get it done,
Wow.
But the problem is that voice doubled down with my own music, and I had to eventually like figure out what it was trying to tell me. But what I figured out is like, okay, well, if I don't even worry about it being good and I just do it every day, then maybe like even if 1 in 10 ideas is good, then I've got a good song after 2 weeks,
Man, that's awesome. I mean, it seems like basically 1 in 10 are good anyway.
Yeah. I was talking to Buzz from the Melvins, and he likened it to panning for gold, And I like what I like about that is that you can pan. You're not the originator of the gold. You're just panning for it, So it's like it kind of removes the responsibility of coming up with something good from your shoulders, because it's like if you come up with something, if you find something good, it doesn't even come from you. And if you don't come up with anything, it's not your fault. You tried.
Man, that is super great. That is awesome. I really like that.
How many of your band members still live in the area?
Let's see. 2 or 3. The original Slint bass player lives in Louisville, as well as the second bass player, and then the guitar player and singer.
And then David is out here in LA.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
How often do you guys get together?
Well, I see Todd, the second bass player, probably most often, but I kind of am hoping to see more of Brian. He moved back here recently. And Ethan, yeah, I see him from time to time too.
And you're all still friends?
Yeah.
Do you have any ambitions or hopes for what you want to do creatively moving forward?
Man, like, I guess not really. I feel like I've sort of thought in those terms, and I still think in those terms, but like, just, I am just sort of taking things as they come. I don't know. Maybe it's boring to hear somebody say what they think they want to do or something. It seems like sometimes if I try to articulate that, people are just like, oh, come on. I don't know if it's just in my head.
Well, it depends. I mean, from doing this show, I've encountered people that fall on both sides of that line. Like, for example, Vinzella Joy, who plays drums for Beyonce, was telling me a story about her mother dying when she was relatively young, and she kind of told her mom that she was going to play drums for Beyonce without having any idea how to do it. And then within a few years, that's what she did. And I was like, wow,
Gosh.
some people can actually actualize their goals. Or who else? Gina Schock from the Go-Go's is from Baltimore, and she said she, drove out to LA with some Coke and a few $100, and she knew she was going to be a star. And then within a couple years, she was in one of the biggest bands in the world. And then other people that have done amazing things, are adamant that they don't have ambitions and they don't think in an ambitious way, or they don't consider that stuff. They just live in the moment. So I feel like either approach can work.
Yeah. I feel like I've just been going like at a little bit too fast a speed, or just sort of been overwhelmed for a while by things, and like this coronavirus sort of layoff shelter period has been really, really good for me. I feel like I've been on a vacation and sort of almost like reconnected with, like what I want to do, and can hopefully build on that. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about moving forward.
Right. It's almost like a timeout from this expectation of always producing something or always doing something.
Yeah. Like I feel like I can't even think then anymore, like what I want to do, or, where I am or where I'm going, or,
So do you feel like you're more in touch with your gut feelings now?
Yeah, I do. It's pretty amazing.
Well, Britt Walford, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.